There are various blocks from different manufacturers. This is a Shimano one. You can cut them down or you can use things like Lego.
This is why he does World Cup stuff and I've got potato hands. All right, it's time for the MBUK Tech Q&A with Will Soffe, who's our workshop manager and of course, former World Cup mechanic. What have we got on our plates today?
So today we're going to be answering your questions from social media and from YouTube, and we are excited to get stuck in.
Certainly are. So question number one is all about
brake pistons, so sticky pistons, and then we've got setting up your tyres tubeless, we've got tips on SRAM axis transmission, we've got suspension setup and getting inside your forks to install volume spacers.
Right, let's crack on with the questions. Okay, so the first question comes from WodUK or Woduk on YouTube, and it is, how do I make sure that my pistons all come out smoothly on a 4-piston brake when I'm servicing my brakes? But I think the real question is, how do you get one piston to come out on its own so you can give it a good clean so that all 4 pistons come out smoothly when you are servicing your brakes?
Okay, so we're looking at hydraulic disc brakes here, I think. So this is a multi-piston caliper, so you've got pistons coming out from both sides and you want them to come out evenly.
Yeah.
If you've got a sticky piston, you want to be able to lubricate them all so they all come in and out at the same time. So I guess the question is, how do you get the one sticky one to come out so you can clean it and sort it?
And leave the other ones in the caliper because, yeah.
You can make them come out later. This is the one we're struggling with. Okay, so there are various blocks from different manufacturers. This is a Shimano one. And you can cut them down or you can use things like Lego in order to wedge the ones that are not sticky and get the sticky one to come out. You could also use a tyre lever.
We were saying earlier you can actually use one of these as well. This is a pad spreader. Be careful with it, don't contaminate your pads, but also don't use it on a piston itself because this is metal and the pistons can be quite fragile, so just take a bit of care.
So specifically, what would you do if you had a sticky piston in your caliper, Tom?
Okay, so if I wanted to get one of the 4 pistons out, I'd get the block that you mentioned and I'd stick it in so 2 of the 4 pistons are covered. I'd then get my trusty tyre lever, go in the backside, and you can kind of like wedge it against the caliper itself on one of the pistons. Give the brake lever a squeeze and the other one will start popping out. Give that a clean. Flip your tyre lever around, squeeze it back in, hold it in place, squeeze the lever again, the other one will come out, and then reverse the process on the other 2 pistons. Just be careful with it, because if you go too far, the piston will pop out, and then you...
So that is how to expose your sticky piston. If you want more information on this topic, click the link here.
All right, Johnny dropped us a line on Instagram and he wants to know how to get his tubeless tape sealed so it doesn't leak.
Okay, so obviously this is the aim of tubeless tape. You're trying to make an airtight seal for the air in your tyre to remain in there. So sticking it down on your rim is a bit of an art rather than a science. So firstly, make sure that your rim is clean and there's no contaminants and no old sealant on it.
What do we clean it with?
So clean it with probably brake cleaner,
okay,
I would say, or isopropyl alcohol. If you've got it, it's like denatured alcohol. The next thing to think about is getting the right width tubeless tape. So here's some examples here. So you want to get tape that is wide enough to cover the whole bed of the rim, including the well. So because there's a well in the middle, the tape will be pulled in a bit when you press it down. So make sure it's wide enough. The next thing to do is you want to tension it. Now this is the one takeaway tip that I think I would give. People often put it on, they make sure it's stuck nicely down, but they don't tension it. So you want there to be enough tension on the tape so that it sticks in that well inside the rim. So you've got kind of a U shape that dips down, so you can brace it against your chest and the floor and then pull the tape nice and tight and keep working it around the rim. And then you want to finish up overlapping over the valve stem. Okay. So you go all the way around and a bit more, and then over your valve you've got a double thickness. Then at your valve, I think the best way that I like to do it is to use a pick or something sharp to press through the tape and sort of stretch it as you make the hole for your valve. Because if you make a cut, that is an area that can like propagate.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, use a pick and then put the valve through.
Don't use your valve like I do though, because it mangles your valve.
I mean, you can definitely use your valve, but yeah, it's nice to use something like this because it just spreads it gently.
This is why he does World Cup stuff and I've got potato hands. All right, so let's assume that we've got your tyre on, you think it's all great, but there's still air coming out. How do you know if it's the tape or the tyre that's gone wrong?
Ah, right, so if it's coming out of the tyre or it's coming out from between the bead and the rim, it could be a tire issue. But if it's coming out the spoke holes or around the valve, you know you're in trouble and you've got to take it all apart, take your tape off and start all over again, unfortunately.
Story of my life. Now, if you are putting a tight tire on with tire levers, especially if they're metal tire levers, be careful with those. Just be careful because the tire lever can push the tape away from the bed of the rim and then you're in a whole world of pain and it's an absolute nightmare, but I'm sure you've never done that.
Definitely have done that in the past. This is how we learn, guys. It's how we learn.
Okay, so the next question has come from Chloe. Again, she's dropped into our DMs, MBUK magazine on Instagram. She is asking about when you put a rear wheel back in a bike with transmission, how do you make sure that the gear still works? I'm guessing maybe she's had some problems.
Tom, I know you've been riding a Sram Axis transmission for around 20 months, nearly 2 years, so show us how it's done.
Here's a bike, it's upside down. I don't care.
We've got a padded floor, it's fine.
All right, so I'm going to take the wheel out just to sort of show you what the problem might be here. So let's whip the axle out, nice and quick. Do the cage lock, which straws do first. Take the wheel out. Okay, so as you can see, the mech's kind of free to move forward and backwards. And that's fine, that's kind of makes it easy to get the wheel in and out. So let's get the wheel back in, and I think this is where Chloe's having issues. When you tighten the axle on transmission, if you do it up real tight and the derailleur is not in the right place, you will have issues because the position of the derailleur can change at this point. And what you need to do is, at this point, before it's tight, push it forward and make sure these two lines are lined up, okay? If these two lines are not lined up, kind of like that, your shifting won't work because the position of the jockey wheels compared to the cassette is kind of out and nothing's in alignment and it just needs to be right. Because when it's right, it works really well, but when it's not, it doesn't, okay? So, when we're tightening the axle, we're just gonna make sure, before it gets too tight, that we pull the mech forward, make sure those two lines align, and then we can properly tighten the axle up to whatever the torque specs are. Pop the cage lock, and then that, in theory, should be some perfectly shifting transmission gears.
Nice, mate. Really good.
But there is one more thing I wanted to add about transmission. So if you've had it all set up fine and it's all been working fine for a few months or something and it starts not working particularly well, just be aware that actually the knuckle of the mech can shift over time if the transmission derailleur bolt has maybe come loose or it wasn't done tight enough. So I had this on a ride recently. I was like, wow, my gear's working, like everything's fine. And the whole thing had just slipped a bit and therefore it just needed a reset. Put it into that B position there, make sure the chain's tight and then tighten everything back together again. Kind of go through the process, but you can do it on the trail, it's kind of easy. But yeah, if your transmission doesn't transmission very well, it might just be that the whole system's slipped and you just need to reset. Okay, so a couple of months ago we posted a review of the 36 versus the Lyric. You can see a clicky link up here. Now in the comments of that, Sidnick did ask us a question about his Zeb. He was saying that when he sees himself riding on film, his Zeb seems to be in the middle of its stroke quite a lot of the time and doesn't come up to the top. So he's asking, does he need to adjust the compression or the rebound damping on his fork?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer. Without seeing you riding the bike, it's going to be very difficult. But here are some things that you could perhaps try. So speeding up the rebound would help the fork to get to that sag point more quickly, or adding more compression damping would also mean you're adding resistance to the fork falling down in the stroke. So you could try one of those things, do a run, and then see what it does and maybe try the other one.
So get it up quicker or stop it from going down faster.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
But there is a compounding factor here, which is your volume spaces. So if you are running too many volume spaces, it could mean that the fork is sitting high in the travel. And if you're not running enough volume spaces, it could mean the fork is sagging and sitting at that low point. What we would recommend is start from the very beginning. So set your sag and then set your damping, go for a run and see how it goes. So start right from the beginning, start again, clean slate, and see how your fork does.
Absolute first principles. There are plenty of great guides on YouTube. Of course, Bike Radar, our overlords, do have a really good fork setup video that we've done a couple over the past few years, haven't we?
Yeah.
But there are some really good videos online to sort of do that. But yeah, start at the start. It's just easier, I think. Yeah.
Let's leave a link here.
Yeah. Our next question again is all about forks, so we're going to jump to that any second now. Alex has asked us how to get inside his Fox Forks air spring because the spanner flats are pretty shallow.
And on the latest Fox Forks, it's an anodized top cap as well, and you don't want to scratch that.
I've scratched quite a few.
It's easily done because in many sockets, they're chamfers, so you can get on top of a nice big steel nut. But with a shallow top cap like this, you don't really want these chamfers. So a lot of suspension firms like Mojo, they'll stick this in the lathe and mill it down flat. So you've got the maximum contact area on these tiny flats. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
You could also buy some.
Yeah, Abbey Tools do them, don't they?
Oh, beautiful, green, spenny, expensive tools. And I think they're aluminium as well, so they won't damage the aluminium on your top cap.
There will be more out there though. You might have to Google them.
Yeah, other tool manufacturers are available. If you're in a pinch, you can use a pair of these.
I see what you did there.
Oh, I didn't even mean to do that. If you're in a pinch, you could use these Knipex wrench pliers. So these squeeze whatever you're about to undo or do up, so there's less chance of damaging those all-important flats. So set to the right size, stick it on your top cap and squeeze. But remember, always let the air out of your air spring first. Do not forget that.
Otherwise, what happens, Tom?
Ouch, is what happens. Yeah.
Can you give us some top tips though for putting it back on? Is it easy to cross those threads? Do I need to use grease? How tight do I go?
So start off by hand because you'll be able to feel very easily if they are cross-threaded. There should be loads of grease in there, like Slick Honey or other lubes are available, so that should help it get threaded in. And then yeah, just pinch it up at the end once it starts getting tighter on that sealing O-ring in there.
Right, we hope that's been useful for you, but if you've got your own question, what do you do, Will?
So watch out for a YouTube community post before our next one of these videos, or just leave a comment below.
Or get in touch on Instagram.